Hello ballers, what's going on? It's Preacher. And obviously, or if you've not seen, in the last couple of days, an interview took place with Fiora, Alex, I'm going to get his name wrong and I'm really sorry dude, Afrasiabi, I want to say. But he's known as Fiora on the forums. People have known him for a very long time, been a big part of Blizzard for a while. And yeah, he's hinted at the end of his interview, like the way Blizzard does. They always kind of drop something important or hint at it right at the very end of a ton of information, possibly hoping that only the most avid will pick up on it just to not cause outrage. But the hint is there that there will be no flying mounts available in Warlords of Draenor. So when we actually move to Draenor through the Dark Portal, our flying mounts will be permanently disabled in that world. Interesting, right? Interesting. Now, before everybody loses their goddamn minds, let's take a breath and be calm, as we usually do around here, and then we'll talk about the good and bad points, and then you can make a sort of informed decision on what you actually think of this, because of course this is instantly going to respond with unsubbing, and yay, this is amazing. Let's take a breath, let's think about it. Blizzard's been pretty open about their regrets regarding flying mounts for a long time. It caused detrimental effects to gameplay for a lot of people, but it also allowed a lot of cool stuff, which is why we can't just dismiss them. Cities like Dalaran, which float way above, and the storm peaks and all that kind of stuff. And in fact, the wonderful architecture of Netherstorm during the Burning Crusade would not have been possible without flying mounts. The fact that we had to traverse the open nether or traverse up into the sky to visit Dalaran and whatever, it would have been a little bit less fun if you weren't just diving off the city down into the world and you just had to take the teleporter all the time. Of course, it's not difficult to create floating areas and give people some sort of one-way access to it, but the flying mounts were actually created much more scope in the world in terms of beauty, in terms of actual effect and grandeur, so they actually did a really good thing in that respect. They also, of course, super convenient. Super convenient, and it's a convenience most of us have gotten used to right now. If I want to go from A to B, using my mount is actually better than using flight points. By a long shot. Very rarely, unless I'm going AFK, do I bother to use a flight point anymore. In most cases, I can even judge how long I'm going to be AFK. Am I going to the bathroom? Am I going to grab a drink? In which case, I'll jump on my flying mount, point myself in the right direction, hit the old numlock, and I'll go and get my drink and come back, and it's quicker than going to a flight point, which is usually out of your way, than taking that flight point that has to route through other flight points to reach where you're going. A wonderful one. I imagine in Mists of Pandaria, the most commonly used flight point in time is the one between your city and going over to where the entrance to the Isle of Thunder is. That would be the most common one. Beyond that, do you really use flight points unless you're going AFK for a long period of time? So why do they hate the flying points? Why do they hate flying mounts? Why has it become a problem? The problem is you don't run into everybody. It actually empties the world. That's the problem with flying mounts. There's zero interaction with other players when you fly above them. Really do just diminish the whole fullness and volume and the population of the world. Some people believe that zones are completely empty. In most cases, they actually aren't empty. It's just that everybody's flying around or skitting through so quickly on their own personal little adventure that you just feel like there's nothing there. And that's a big problem, because the world needs to feel populated, otherwise it's just a barren wasteland solo player experience. So this became more and more of a problem. As soon as people hit their flying mount goals, the world just emptied completely. And the more people that hit cap and unlocked the ability to fly, then instantly those big zones became emptier and emptier and emptier, to the point where all you have on the ground are actually people who are under cap, who don't have the leveling available in order to fly, and then what you had was the level 90s or whatever just dropping off their mounts and just killing them, and they had no chance to escape because level 90s can fly and you can't. You have to get on your ground mount and a level 90 can stalk you quite easily. It's actually an open world for complete assholes to gank you, right? How many of you have visited Hellfire recently? I did, doing some TBC stuff, and what did I find flying above my Horde town? Alliance level 90s? Awful fucking players. For real, if you're listening to this, go ahead. You fucking suck. If you're level 90 and you're floating above a Hellfire city to gank level 50s and 60s, you are a piece of shit. Just be aware that people are laughing at you constantly. But there they are. Multiple level 90s just floating above these leveling towns which are 30 levels below, waiting to gank you and stalk you, and it's because people can't fly. And therefore, that's another detriment as well. Open world for newbies to feel powerful. Is that a good thing? Not particularly. Not particularly. Terrible people gaining power over weaker people is always sad. Always, always sad. So flying mounts had that detrimental aspect to them. Which one do you prefer? That's got to be the question. It's got to be the question. Lord knows if you were there at the launch of Mr. Pandaria, when the zones were flooded with people. There was people everywhere. You were climbing up. You had the also grandeur, as we talked about the grandeur earlier on of the flying situation, of climbing the eternal stairs in order to reach the tavern in the mists. All this kind of aspect of stuff where it's on the ground, underground caves. How many of you actually noticed the actual landscape of the world beyond looking at your map to see that mining node or that herb? Right? That's all we tend to see, is the mining node or the herb, and that's about it. We land, we pick it, we go away, and generally it's the quickest person to get that. The guys who like farming, they're going to be hit the hardest by, say, removal of flying mounts. Really are going to be hit hard because we're used to it, right? But perhaps Draenor is geographically landscaped to accommodate the lack of flying mounts. There's no way we can actually just say, base it off Mr. Pandaria. We can't base what the Draenor landscape will look like off what we're used to, which is herbs which grow atop mountains, because the game obviously assumes you have a flying mount to achieve such things, right? It obviously assumes you're going to have access to this resource. If Draenor assumes that you do not have access to that resource, then of course the landscape will differ completely. And as someone who farmed endlessly in vanilla for my potions and herbs, nah, it wasn't that bad. It's actually kind of cool because this, again, repopulates the zones. It creates the feel that you're in an MMO, which is something Blizzard's really desperately trying to recapture. It's one of those things that we asked for as a kid because we wanted all the toys. Well, sure, I imagine if we could just fly our own way. Imagine if we could just fly wherever we wanted to be. That would be awesome, right? And of course, on the face of it, it sounds awesome. What we didn't really consider is people never walked again. We gave everybody a free car, nobody ever walked again. And nobody saw each other, nobody spoke to each other, no one interacted, there was no PvP, there was no balanced PvP. Because the only people who were looking to gank you were the one-off or little groups of heroes who were looking to dive on one lonely person. What you certainly didn't have, which is something we tend to see on the Isle of Thunder, right? And we tend to see, not on the new one, the Timeless Isle, is in fact occasionally you'll have buddies around you. Depending on if your realm is reasonably average in population, it obviously works out quite badly to not have a flying mount if you're in a heavily one-sided population. That would be really bad, because anybody knows who's been on the Timeless Isle and your server is 90% Alliance and you happen to be a Horde, you're in for a really bad time. You're in for a really bad time, but that's something Blizzard needs to work on itself. But what you can say is when you visit the Timeless Isle, you'll notice that there are tons and tons of people there. And you might think to yourself, yeah, this is because it's the new hot shit. This is the new place to be. This is where people are grinding this wonderful, terrible, terrible gear. And this is where you have to be in order to gain access to these things. It's not quite true. You'll actually be surprised if you /who a zone how many people are actually in that zone. There are a lot of people in every single zone. One of the big problems is a lot of those people are just flying around doing nothing. AFKing, and therefore don't add to the world in any respect. How do I feel about it? In conclusion, I suppose. I'm undecided. I'm used to that level of convenience. I'm used to it. One of the big things that I always anticipated whenever a new expansion came out, such as Wrath of the Lich King, I couldn't wait to hit level 78 in order to get access to my flying mount because I was so sick of walking, because the Wrath of the Lich King zones were so busy with mobs that it was hard to actually just ride around without aggroing everything all over the place. But maybe that adds to the actual feel. But for me, I found it frustrating as somebody who'd come from TBC when I had a flying mount all over the place. Similar with Mr. Pandaria, similar with Cataclysm. Every time my flying mount is accessible, I want to use it. I want to use it. What does this mean for things like Druids, who have Swift Flight Form, an integral part of their class? No longer usable for an entire expansion in the main zones you're going to be exploring? Will Druids be pissed off at that? I like the idea of busier zones. I like the idea of running into people. It adds more depth. There's no doubt about that. Once you see people who are cool and maybe making groups, you see people populating in an area to get things done, that's always really nice. But we have to consider, is this a lesson that people are going to hate because we're used to this level of convenience? You're taking away my wheels. Anybody knows who's had a car and then loses it, it fucking sucks. It fucking sucks. But maybe we accept it and move on. I'm undecided. I'm on the fence. I've got to say, I'm on the fence on this one. I don't know if it's something that I'm fine with while I level, but then I want my convenience back. Sure, I'll put up with being on the ground for a while, but it's been many years that I've had access to this level convenience, and you're just going to take it away? Is the zones going to work out on that respect? Are they going to be matching this newfound contrivance that we have to be on the ground all the time? Will it add much more to the gameplay? I'm kind of 50-50. Let me know what you think, guys. See you later. Bye.